November 19, 1944. A muddy clearing near Wassenach, Germany. The air is a frigid, damp shroud that tastes of pine sap and cordite. You can feel the concussion of distant artillery not so much in your ears, but as a deep, resonant thrum in the bones of your chest. This is the Hurtgen forest, or what's left of it, a landscape of shattered trees and churned earth, where the 28th Infantry Division has been bleeding for weeks. Here, in a makeshift aid station, the war is a production line of human misery. Corporal Elias Vance, a medic with the 103rd Medical Battalion, moves through the chaos with the practiced economy of a man who has forgotten what it feels like to be warm or dry. His world has been reduced to the smell of wet wool, antiseptic, and the cloying, metallic scent of blood that clings to everything. The canvas tent flaps snap in the wind, offering a glimpse of a world painted in browns and grays. Stretcher bearers, their faces grim masks of mud and exhaustion, bring in the latest harvest from the front line, their boots sucking at the near liquid ground. Vance is cleaning a wound on the arm of a GI from the 112th Infantry Regiment, a kid no older than 19 whose teeth are chattering from shock and cold. The medic's movements are steady, methodical. He applies a sulfa dressing, his fingers working deftly despite the numbness. He doesn't ask the boy's name. He learned early on that names were an emotional luxury he couldn't afford. He's just finished wrapping the bandage when the sound of a jeep engine, straining in low gear, cuts through the low moans of the wounded. The vehicle slithers to a halt just outside the tent, its tires spinning in the muck. A young MP, his helmet slung low over his eyes, hops out and barks an order. 4 figures are prodded from the back of the vehicle. Prisoners. 3 are men, weary Wehrmacht soldiers in filthy field gray uniforms, their expressions a familiar mixture of defeat and relief. The 4th is a woman. She stands apart from the men, a stark, upright figure in the drab uniform of a Luftwaffe Helferin, a female auxiliary. A gray greatcoat is pulled tight around her thin frame, and a small, forage-style cap sits on her blonde hair, which is pulled back in a severe bun. She might be 20, maybe 21. Her face is pale and smudged with dirt, but it's her expression that holds Vance's attention for a fraction of a second. It's not fear, or anger, or even despair. It's a profound, unnerving emptiness. A mask of placid stillness in a world of constant, violent motion. The MP gestures towards the aid tent. This one's got a scratch on her arm from some shrapnel. Captain said get her patched up before we move em back to the collection point. Vance gives a curt nod, wiping his hands on an already stained rag. Another task. Another body to process. He gestures for the woman to come forward. She moves with a strange, stiff precision, her boots making soft, deliberate sounds on the muddy duckboards laid across the tent floor. The MP follows a few paces behind her, his M1 rifle held loosely but ready. Vance points to a small cut on her left forearm, visible where the sleeve of her coat is torn. It's minor, a clean slice that's barely bleeding. A 5-minute job. The tent is crowded, and the only free space is a small area near a stack of medical supply crates. He picks up a small wooden box that once held morphine syrettes and places it on the ground. His German is functional, cobbled together from a high school class and phrases picked up from other prisoners. Setzen Sie sich, bitte, he says, his voice flat with fatigue. Please sit down. He turns to grab a basin of clean water and some gauze. When he turns back, she hasn't moved. She is standing exactly where she was, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She is staring at the wooden crate as if it were a coiled snake. Her stillness is absolute, a rock in the swirling river of the aid station. Vance feels a flicker of annoyance. He's tired, he's cold, and he has a dozen more serious casualties to attend to. He gestures again, more insistently this time. Sitzen, he repeats, pointing at the crate, then at her. Sit. The mask on her face doesn't shatter, but a crack appears. A subtle tremor runs through her. Her pale blue eyes, which had been fixed on the middle distance, now lock onto his. They are wide, and for the first time, Van sees something behind the emptiness. A deep, primal terror. The sounds of the aid station, the murmur of doctors, the hiss of a sterilizer, the pained cry of a man being moved seem to recede into a dull background hum. Corporal Vance's world narrows to the space between himself and the German woman. He sees the slight parting of her lips, the shallow, rapid rise and fall of her chest beneath the heavy gray wool. She is breathing like a cornered animal. The MP behind her shifts his weight, the leather of his gear creaking. "What's the problem, Corporal? She given you trouble?" Vance holds up a hand, silencing him without looking away from the woman's face. His initial irritation has evaporated, replaced by a disquieting curiosity. This isn't defiance. He's seen defiance in the eyes of captured SS officers, a burning, arrogant hatred. This is different. This is the stark, abject fear of a child staring into the dark. He tries again, softening his tone. "Es ist in Ordnung," he says slowly. "It's all right. Nur für einen Moment. So I can clean your arm." He mimes the act of washing and bandaging. He points once more to the crate. A simple, innocuous object. A place to rest for a moment. But her reaction is to flinch back, a small, almost imperceptible step that speaks volumes. It's as if his gesture was a physical blow. Her hands, clasped before her, are now white-knuckled. He can see the fine trembling in her fingers. He's seen shell-shocked men tremble like that, their bodies betraying them with spasms they cannot control. But her fear is focused, directed entirely at that single, simple request. To sit. Then, she speaks. Her voice is a dry, rasping whisper, so quiet it's almost lost in the ambient noise. It's in broken, heavily accented English. "Bit. Please." Her eyes plead with him, a desperate, silent negotiation. "No. Not, sit." The words hang in the cold air, imbued with a weight that makes no sense. The MP snorts. "For crying out loud. Just make her sit, Doc." Vance ignores him. He takes a step closer, moving slowly, cautiously, the way you would approach a spooked horse. "Why?" he asks, his German failing him for a moment. "Warum nicht?" The question seems to land on her like a physical weight. Her gaze drops from his face to the muddy floorboards. She shakes her head, a tiny, almost spastic movement. The empty mask is gone now, completely shattered. In its place is a raw, exposed vulnerability that feels deeply out of place in the hardened environment of the war. He realizes he is holding his breath. All around them, the grim business of the medical battalion continues unabated. A surgeon calls for more plasma. A chaplain murmurs last rites in a quiet corner. But here, time has stalled. Vance makes a decision. He kicks the wooden crate aside. It scrapes against the duckboard with a hollow sound. The woman's eyes follow its movement, and he sees a fractional release of tension in her shoulders. It is the confirmation he needs. The object itself is the source of the terror. "Okay," he says, switching back to English, hoping the tone will convey more than the words. "Okay. No sit. Stehen. You can stand." He gestures for her to extend her arm. She hesitates for a moment, her eyes searching his for a trick, a lie. Seeing none, she slowly, rigidly, holds out her arm. Her sleeve is stiff with dried mud and something darker. As he takes her arm gently in his hand, he is struck by how cold her skin is, and by the bird-like fragility of her wrist. He begins to clean the wound, his touch as gentle as he can manage. But his mind is racing. This isn't about a stubborn prisoner or a language barrier. He is standing at the edge of something far darker, a story hidden behind a wall of silence, a story that begins and ends with the simple, terrifying act of taking a seat. Corporal Vance works in a new kind of silence. It's not the absence of noise, but a pocket of intense focus that insulates him and the German woman from the surrounding chaos. He swabs the gash on her arm with an antiseptic that makes her hiss through her teeth, but she doesn't pull away. Her body remains ramrod straight, her posture unnaturally rigid, as if she's braced for an impact that never comes. He applies a clean gauze pad and begins wrapping it with a roll of bandage. His movements are automatic, his mind is elsewhere, trying to piece together the fragments of her reaction. He has treated hundreds of soldiers, both Allied and German. He has seen men broken in every conceivable way. Yet, this woman's silent, specific terror is a new and unnerving puzzle. When he finishes with the bandage, he secures it with a piece of adhesive tape. "Fertig," he says softly. "Finished." She withdraws her arm slowly, cradling it against her body. Her eyes are still downcast, fixed on the muddy floor. On an impulse, Vance walks over to a large thermos and pours a measure of steaming, bitter coffee into a tin mug. It's more chicory than coffee, but it's hot. He holds it out to her. "Here." Her gaze lifts, first to the mug, then to his face. Suspicion wars with a deep, cavernous exhaustion. After a long moment, she reaches out with a trembling hand and takes it. Her fingers brush his, and he is startled again by the profound, icy cold of her skin. She brings the mug towards her lips, but her hands are shaking so violently that hot liquid slops over the side, scalding her fingers. She lets out a small, sharp gasp of pain but doesn't drop the cup. She just stands there, shaking, as if her own body is a foreign thing she can no longer command. Vance takes the mug from her gently. "It's okay," he murmurs. He sets it down on a nearby table. "You're safe here." The words sound hollow and absurd even to his own ears. What does safe even mean in this place? But he has to try. He has to bridge the chasm of silence that separates them. He leans against the table, affecting a casual posture, trying to appear non-threatening. He speaks in his slow, careful German. "You must be very tired. You have been marching a long time." She gives a single, jerky nod. Her eyes dart around the tent, taking in the rows of wounded men on stretchers, the blood-soaked dressings in the buckets, the sheer, overwhelming evidence of the war's brutality. It's as if she is seeing it all for the first time. "Why are you afraid of the chair?" Vance asks, his voice low. He doesn't use the word crate. He uses the German word, Stuhl. Chair. The word hits her like a physical shock. Her breath catches in her throat. Her carefully constructed wall of composure, already cracked, finally crumbles into dust. A tear escapes one eye, then another, tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. They are silent tears, born of a sorrow too deep for sobs. Her lips tremble, and the story begins to spill out, a torrent of broken phrases, a disjointed mosaic of German and English. She speaks of her unit, a Luftwaffe signals post, overrun weeks ago during a chaotic retreat. Not by Americans. By someone else. She mentions a cellar. The cold, the damp, the darkness. And the interrogations. The word she keeps coming back to, repeating it like a terrible mantra, is Stuhl. The chair. It wasn't in the middle of the room. It was bolted to the floor in the corner. She explains, in halting, nightmarish fragments, that being told to sit was the beginning. It meant the questions were over and the pain was about to start. They made her sit for hours. Days. She doesn't know how long. Sitting wasn't rest. Sitting was the trigger. Her body and mind had forged an unbreakable link, to sit is to suffer. As Vance listens, the image of the simple wooden crate transforms in his mind. It is no longer a box. It is a symbol of unimaginable cruelty, a ghost from a dark cellar that has followed her all the way to this tent. A cold knot tightens in Elias Vance's stomach. The woman's fragmented confession paints a picture of deliberate, methodical cruelty that transcends the random violence of the battlefield he has grown accustomed to. The shrapnel wounds, the bullet holes, the mangled limbs, those are the brutal, impersonal mathematics of war. This was different. This was intimate. He looks at her, truly looks at her, and sees past the gray uniform and the enemy designation. He sees a young woman whose trauma is so profound it has rewired her most basic instincts, turning the simple act of rest into a harbinger of agony. His medical training kicks in, overlaying a grid of clinical logic onto the emotional chaos of her story. The psychological wound is obvious, but what about the physical? The way she stands, with that unnatural, painful rigidity. The way she moves, as if her own joints are her enemy. He suspects the scars are not just in her mind. He has to be sure. He has to know the extent of the damage if he is to offer any real help. This is a delicate moment. He is an American soldier, she is a German prisoner. The MP is still watching from a distance, a silent, armed guardian of the divide between them. Vance knows he is crossing a line, but the medic in him overrides the soldier. He steps closer and speaks in a calm, professional tone, the one he uses to reassure a man before setting a broken bone. "Ich bin Sanitator," he says, tapping the red cross on his helmet. "I am a medic. My job is to help. It does not matter what uniform." He lets the words sink in, then continues, choosing his German carefully. "I need to look at your back. I think you may have other injuries. Wunden." He uses the word for wounds, a word she understands all too well. Her eyes widen with a new kind of fear. Not the sharp terror the chair had induced, but a deeper, more vulnerable dread. It's the fear of being exposed, of having the full extent of her humiliation laid bare. She shakes her head, taking a half step back. Vance stands his ground. He doesn't press, doesn't command. He just waits, his expression patient. He is offering her a choice, perhaps the first real choice she has had in weeks. He is asking for her trust. The seconds stretch into an eternity. Finally, with a shuddering sigh that seems to drain the last of her resistance, she gives a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He turns to the MP. "I need some privacy. Over there." He points to a corner of the tent where a canvas sheet has been hung to create a makeshift examination area. The MP hesitates, his jaw tight. "Captain's orders were just to patch her arm." "Look at her," Vance says, his voice low and sharp. "She can barely stand. You want to be the one who tells the captain you let a prisoner with serious injuries get sent down the line without a proper check." The MP glares for a moment, then relents with a grumble, gesturing with his rifle for them to proceed. Vance leads her behind the canvas partition. The space is small, barely large enough for two people, lit by a single, dim lantern that casts long, dancing shadows. The air is thick with the smell of canvas and damp earth. "Okay," he says gently. "Langsam." Slowly. He helps her with the heavy buttons of her greatcoat, then the tunic beneath it. The wool is coarse and damp against his fingers. As she shrugs the uniform off her shoulders, she keeps her back to him, her posture still stiff and protective. When the fabric falls away to reveal the thin cotton shift she wears underneath, he sees it. Even in the poor light, the evidence is undeniable. The garment is stained with dried blood and fluid in several places along her lower back. With infinite care, he helps her lift the shift. And then he sees the full story. Her skin, from her lower back down to her hips, is a grotesque tapestry of injury. Deep, angry bruises, faded to shades of violet, green, and yellow, bloom across the flesh. But it's the other marks that make his breath catch. There are raw, weeping pressure sores and a series of half-healed, linear lacerations, marks that speak of being forced against a hard, unyielding edge for an inhuman length of time. The scars are a perfect, horrific map of her torment, a physical testament to the story her broken words had only just begun to tell. Corporal Vance has seen death in countless forms. He has packed the ruptured intestines of a man back into his own abdomen and held hands with boys as the light faded from their eyes. He thought he was immune to shock, that the horrors of the Hurtgen had cauterized his soul. He was wrong. The sight of the woman's back, of the deliberate, systematic damage inflicted upon her, strikes him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't the work of an exploding shell or a stray bullet. This was the patient, calculated application of pain. It was the work of a man, or men, in a quiet room, far from the noise of the front line. For a long moment, he can only stare, the medic's clinical detachment dissolving into pure, unadulterated anger. He feels a hot flush of rage on behalf of this stranger, this enemy who is no longer an enemy, but simply a victim. He forces the emotion down, channeling it into his work. He dips a clean cloth into a basin of warm water and begins to gently clean the wounds. He expects her to flinch, to cry out, but she remains utterly still, her head bowed, her shoulders trembling slightly. She endures his touch with the same stoic silence she has maintained since her arrival. He works with a tenderness he didn't know he still possessed, cleaning each lesion, applying a liberal dusting of sulfanilamide powder to stave off infection. His hands are no longer just the tools of a medic, they are an apology from one part of humanity to another. He covers the worst of the sores with sterile gauze pads, securing them with strips of tape. The entire time, neither of them speaks a word. The silence in their small, partitioned corner is a fragile sanctuary, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the war just beyond the canvas wall. When he is finished, he helps her lower the shift and put her tunic back on. He gives her 2 precious aspirin tablets from his own kit. For the pain, he says, his voice hoarse. She takes them without a word, her eyes finally meeting his. The terror is gone, replaced by a profound, soul-deep weariness, but also something else, a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent thanks that transcends language and allegiance. He knows what he has done is a temporary fix. Her physical wounds will heal, but the deeper scars, the ones etched onto her memory, will remain. He also knows she cannot continue to stand. He looks around the crowded tent, his eyes falling on a folded army blanket on an empty cot. He grabs it. He doesn't take her back to the supply crates. Instead, he finds a clear patch of earth on the floor, away from the main thoroughfare of stretcher bearers. He lays the blanket down, smoothing it out over the damp ground. He kneels and looks up at her. He doesn't point. He doesn't command. He simply speaks, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to sit," he says in English. "You can lie down. On your front. You can rest." Anneliese Richter stares at the simple woolen blanket on the ground. It is not a chair. It is not a crate. It is not a prelude to pain. It is an offer of comfort, an acknowledgement of her silent suffering. For the first time since she arrived, a single, genuine emotion breaks through the wall of her trauma. Relief. It floods her face, softening the hard lines of fear and tension. Slowly, carefully, as if testing a limb she thought was broken, she lowers herself to her knees. Then, with a long, shuddering exhale that seems to carry weeks of pain and fear with it, she eases herself down onto the blanket, lying on her stomach and resting her head on her bandaged forearm. Her body finally goes limp, surrendering to gravity and exhaustion. Vance watches her for a moment. Outside, the war grinds on. Another ambulance is arriving. Another life is hanging in the balance. Nothing has changed. And yet, everything has. He knows she will be taken away soon, another piece of human wreckage processed by the vast, impersonal machinery of war. But as he turns back to the endless line of the wounded, he carries with him the weight and the grace of that small, profound moment, a medic and his patient, a man and a woman, who found a sliver of shared humanity in the heart of the forest, on a cold November day.